Today we're going to be talking about, or this afternoon, this evening, kind of, about hydrotherapy. And all of you are familiar with hydrotherapy to some extent, um, because I don't smell anything too bad. So you all have showered recently, right? But before we delve into that, let's go ahead and say another word of prayer. Um, Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all that you do for us and being our Heavenly Father, one that we can rely on, fall back on, turn to, no matter the circumstance. Help us to rely on you more and to trust you and to tell others how they can trust you and cast all their cares upon you as well. Be with our minds. There's a lot of information that's coming at us. Help us to be able to retain it so that we can help ourselves and also help those around us. Thank you for creating this world and the and the laws of physics that govern it. In Jesus' name, amen. Awesome. So hydrotherapy is a personal favorite topic of mine. I think it often is underrated um, from my thoughts. Oftentimes we think of hydrotherapy. Oh yeah, my grandmother used to do hot and cold or something, and we kind of like put the emphasis of not being so powerful sometimes. But I'd like to uh, have your minds chained if that is your persuasion. That is really powerful. And I would actually say, based on the evidence, and if I succeed, I think you'll say it as well, that it's probably one of the most, if not the most powerful external therapy one can do. So I think that's pretty profound, just because of the how much it can influence metabolism and physiology. And we're going to see that as we go today. But what I should do is start this. Uh, Maybe I have to unplug it and then plug it back in. Praise the Lord. So, hydrotherapy is the use of water, both internally and externally. We'll be focusing more on external application of water for any therapeutic use or purpose. And so we're going to look at a variety of therapies and treatments. Tomorrow will be a little bit more practical. It'll be short but practical. But we're going to go over more of the, I guess, the physiology of hydrotherapy, or what's happening and why it works, and uh, and um, and giving you more rationale. So you'll be more encouraged to apply it in your own life. So it's the use of water for a therapeutic purpose, treatment of disease, or just to feel better. So how it works, it affects your blood vessels. Um, you can actually see this on your own if you've ever been washing the dishes or something, and your hands turn like a nice red or something because it's nice hot water. If you're fortunate enough to have hot water in your sink, and that's called vasodilation, because the blood vessels are dilating, increasing uh, blood volume in that area, so it turns red. And then when you rinse with cold water, or rinse with hot water, or just put your hands in cold water, they'll turn a little pale. That's because you're modulating the circulation. That's one of the principal ways hydrotherapy works. But that's not the limitation of hydrotherapy, but principally through vascular compliance and vasoconstriction, which is constriction of the blood vessels, and vasodilation, dilation of the blood vessels. So by appropriately using these two physiologic principles, one enables us to increase or augment circulation throughout the body, depending on where the hot and the cold are being applied. So it really gives us uh, quite a bit of power. But before we even get into that, why would we want to increase the circulation in the first place? Kind of went over this a little bit in previous talks, but let's just name some things, and as you name them, I'll just repeat them for the people online. What are some things that are in the blood that would be beneficial to be circulated? Oxygen, probably number one, right? Oxygen via the hemoglobin. That's where it binds and gets transported throughout the body. What else is in the blood that's important to health? Glucose, nutrients, foods, yeah. Fuel. What else? Proteins, the building blocks of our body. Everything that you see right here is protein, right? Um, so that's very important, but it's not what makes up the majority of us. It's what makes up our physical, but we're still mainly water. What else is transported in the blood? Hormones, electrolytes, yeah. Oh, yeah, whatever's on that list. Yeah. Electrolytes, white blood cells, proteins, platelets, hormones. Yeah, I didn't either. No, yeah. Using the resources that you have is not cheating. So Google is a resource that you have. So this is why we want to increase circulation, because all those things are essential to life. Remember, as we learned, as Monica reminded us, it's Leviticus 17:11. Yeah, life of the creature is in the blood. And we can truly see that, actually. Everything requires blood. There's certain areas of our body that are avascular, like cartilage and tendons. They don't have direct blood supply. So they're at a little bit of a disadvantage when it comes to healing and recovery. And we see that manifested when we do sprain our ankle or injuries. It takes longer for those to heal. But muscles, in the process of getting bigger muscles, you tear those and they rebuild rather quickly. So that's the difference between circulation and non-circulation. So, or that, blood vessel uh, rich tissue and non-blood vessel rich tissue. So avascular just means without blood vessels. So the life of the creature is in the blood. 17:11. Yeah, absolutely. The Bible says that, and also science says that. So what do all these conditions have in common? Heart disease, peripheral artery disease, atherosclerosis, arterial sclerosis, varicose veins, diabetes, obesity, Raynaud's disease, osteoarthritis, nephritis. What do they have in common? Yeah, they're all either caused by or affect circulation. So heart disease, depending on where it is, if it's due to atherosclerosis, arteriosclerosis, or just a valve condition in the heart, or it's pretty obvious that it's affected by circulation, whether the tissue, the heart muscle is not getting enough of blood supply, or not. Peripheral artery disease, just because of arteriosclerosis, those blood vessels are constricted and they can't circulate the blood as well, and they also can't thermoregulate because of that. So you got to be more aware of applying heat in those circumstances. Atherosclerosis, um, narrowing of the blood vessels, hardening of the blood vessel walls due to uh, plaques, and arteriosclerosis just hardening due to other reasons. Varicose veins, just the one-way valves in your veins that keep the blood moving in one direction. They become weak, or they're not closing altogether. So you have semilunar valves in your veins which keep the blood moving in one direction because it's operating on a lower pressure system. So that's like little lobster traps. It keeps the blood going as either muscle moves up against those veins or the pressure from the arterial side keeps it moving. So, and then diabetes, as we learned, through the inflammation of those blood vessels, it decreases circulation. And then Raynaud's disease, it's not really fully understood, but it's just often actually multiple triggers, but just constriction of the blood vessels in your hands and feet specifically, just constriction, usually sometimes with cold response or other responses, even stress. Osteoarthritis um, is actually like they usually say it's the disease like the wear and tear disease. It just happens in life, and it just. But really, we weren't designed to have osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis is just the breaking down of the cartilage faster than it can rebuild. Um, and like my kids or even myself right now, I'm at the stage where I can rebuild the cartilage as fast as I'm breaking it down, because as I'm moving, as I'm working, as I'm doing stuff, I am wearing away at that cartilage, but I'm also rebuilding cartilage. And often what happens in the case of osteoarthritis is that just the mechanisms of rebuilding are getting slower. Either the raw materials aren't there, or we're not getting the prostaglandins to that location to be able to build that collagen. So it's affected. So increased circulation will help that. And then nephritis, as we talked about in the earlier presentation, uh, you know, if we have decreased glomerular filtration rate, the rate at which fluid is going through the kidneys, then you're going to have problems excreting metabolic byproducts, and also in turn that alone in and of itself is going to increase the blood pressure through the um, uh, aldosterone cycle. Uh, there's another. Yep. So definitely all these things are affected or caused by poor circulation. So, as I just said right there. So, healthy blood and circulation are essential. Here's a quote that I really like. In order to have good health, we must have good blood. For the blood is the current of life. It repairs waste. Thank you, body. When supplied with the proper food elements and when cleansed and vitalized by contact with pure air, it carries life and vigor to every part of the system. The more perfect the circulation, the better will this work be accomplished. And then here's the same book. Uh, Actually, it is in Ministry of Healing too, but here in this, the reference is Healthful Living. Perfect health depends upon perfect circulation. And it's just, I love how logical that is because it really is about the blood and circulating the blood. Um, mhm. So, hydrotherapy, we're going to look at a variety of things, but just to show the power of it, a hot compress, like a fomentation, which is just a moist towel or something. It can be ceramic, little beads or sand, but something that delivers moist heat into the body. Fomentation um, can actually increase circulation to your back by 150%. So just on your low back to your entire back increases circulation 156%. So that's pretty remarkable increase on that those blood vessels. A 30-minute warm bath improves blood fluidity, the viscosity of the blood. It improves how well it can flow, and decreases the viscosity of blood. Because actually, blood is actually a tissue. It is a tissue. It's not just a liquid. It's actually a tissue. Like you have, um, you know, smooth muscle, skeletal muscle, scar tissue. It is a tissue in and of itself. So it actually becomes less viscous when it gets heated up, and it can flow better. Yes, I can repeat it. Yeah. Oh,
How long will that last before it returns to
yeah. That's a very good question. So, how long will that hemofluidity last? Thank you, AJ. How long will that hemofluidity last? And we will answer that question. There is a latent period, but it's not directly due to like the heat causing the blood to be more less viscous. It's actually due to nitric oxide that it has a latent effect, and we'll get to that. Yes. Yes, it can. Yep, well, definitely, definitely. So to a lesser extent, though, because you're not in contact with as much thermal energy. So the dermis actually can hold about 25 to 30% of the entire quantity of blood. So your dermis is your skin here. Actually, this is your epidermis. Right underneath it is your dermis, where you have a lot of blood vessels. So all of those blood vessels, when dilated, can hold, like you're in a hot bath or something, 25 to 30% of your blood volume. That's pretty significant, especially when you're wanting to do contrast. So if you go in a hot bath and then you go in a cold, you've just circulated, like conceptually, you know, circulated 1/3 of your blood almost. And you just keep doing that. You're exchanging it. You're doing a lot of cycles. You're circulating throughout your body quite a bit. So that's a lot of impact that we have over the body. But so with all this cardiovascular, adaptations and changes and things that we're doing, is it safe for those with cardiovascular disease? That's a good question. So the answer is yes. According to this 104-degree warm water immersion study conducted on men with clinically stable coronary artery disease, it was found to be stable. The study showed that sauna therapy with high humidity was safe for patients with stable heart conditions such as hypertension, coronary disease, and stable controlled chronic heart failure. So with those with unstable heart conditions, I'd be careful about doing hydrotherapy, especially if one has limited experience with that. It's not an absolute contraindication. So, is hydrotherapy safe for those with cardiovascular disease? Or is this a continuation of that same topic? Even a simple warm foot bath has been proven to improve coronary flow reserve with no adverse effects on patients with coronary artery disease. So, metabolism. Metabolism is defined as the chemical processes that occur within a living organism in order to maintain life. And so, actually, we hear that word in regards to calories, right? Oh, I've got a slow metabolism or I've got a fast metabolism. It's kind of a myth that that's like a fixed thing. You have control over your metabolism because you have control over how much mitochondria you can produce, and that's really kind of what dictates your metabolism. If you've got a lot of mitochondria, which means they're ready to take fuel and put it into usable energy currency of your body, ATP, then you're going to be burning more calories. So that's your metabolism. And you can change your metabolic rate by doing exercise, increasing that. And you can change it for worse by not doing exercise and letting your mitochondrial density decrease. So, but here's the thing, one temperature rise in metabolism that's in Celsius equals about a 10 to 12.5% increase in metabolic rate. So that's pretty significant. Let me just read if I read that right. Yep, if I knew that right. Yeah. So 12 and so every degree you rise in Celsius, 10 to 12.5% increase in metabolic rate. So let's say you increase, you know, by 3 degrees Celsius, which is achievable, and even higher. You increase metabolism by um, uh, 24, 36%. Right? Did I read that right? Yeah, 36 point something. Um, so that's pretty significant. And even actually, just warm baths have been used as a therapy for losing weight for people that are actually handicapped or can't move very well or shouldn't be moving for whatever reason. Just putting them in a bath helps them to lose weight because you're increasing their metabolism. Calories in, calories out. If you're limiting the calories that are going in and you're still burning calories, then you're going to eventually meet a net loss of calories. And in that case, would be a beneficial thing. So remember that one degree rise in Celsius equals 10 to 12.5% rising. Absolutely. So the question was, just for the online watchers, the question was, if somebody has a fever, elevated temperature, their body is working more. It wasn't a question; it was more of like an affirmation of the information. Um, they have to work more because their body. So this is a law. As the heat increases, metabolism increases. So yeah, that's exactly right. So that's why a fever is exhausting for somebody. If somebody has a fever, it takes a lot of work for them to be able to generate that fever because that energy has to come either from within the system or from outside the system. So if it's outside the system, that sun is generating that energy. If it's within the system, it's the body is generating that system. And so as we're going to learn, fevers are very important and beneficial things. And sometimes people don't have the energy to be able to produce a fever. And that's where it's helpful, even if they do have the energy, that's where it's helpful to even create an artificial fever, put them into a warm environment, create that warm environment for them. And that's loaded with benefits, as we'll soon find out. Very, very good observation there. So, but however, one exception, it's not really an exception, it's just the way the body's designed to operate, is muscle. So, hot actually decreases the metabolism in a way of muscle. So when you're hot, what do you feel like doing? If it's a hot day, do you feel like going out for a run and doing all sorts of stuff? No, you feel like just relaxing. Your muscles don't really want to generate any more additional heat, right? As opposed to when you're cold, what do? Your diffuser motor drive and other things kick in, and it's almost unconscious to try to generate body heat. So it's reverse in that case. Um, and yeah, so we see that very clearly there with those examples. So that smooth muscle and also skeletal muscle have that reaction, and we saw that with when we put our hands in hot water. What happens to the blood vessels? They tighten up, or no, they relax, right? And then when they relax, the lumen, the area inside the blood vessel, gets larger, and so it has more blood volume in them. And so, um, but then when we put them in cold water, what happens? They constrict because that's the involuntary reaction. That's the response they have. And so it derivates the blood away from that area. So we can modulate circulation that way. So thixotropy, there's some terms here. This will be on the test tomorrow morning. So no, thixotropy is a physics term, which just means that as something is being worked or as heat is applied to that substance, it becomes more extensible, more elastic. Okay, so a lot of our, actually all of the tissue in our body is that way. Um, Connective tissue and also muscle. As heat is applied to it, it becomes more extensible. So if you want to give somebody a nice back rub, you can apply some heat to that, and then the muscles will be much more receptive to that massage, or whatever therapeutic thing you're wanting to achieve, range of motion or mobilization or something like that. And that goes with scar tissue as well, reducing scar tissue. Applying heat will make whatever breaking up you do have a more permanent effect and more substantial. So thixotropy. Let's just read this real quick. Good aching. Yep. This is why just putting a fomentation or a hot pack on your upper trapezius muscles when they're so tight just relaxes them because it's a law of nature. Heat increases the extensibility and just increases the elasticity of them, the pliability. You can also achieve that by just working something. Um, I think the experiment is like cornstarch. Cornstarch and water. When you hit it real hard, it's like a solid, but when you just push into it, um, it's a liquid. It's kind of like that. Uh-huh. So vascular compliance is in regards to how extensible or elastic the blood vessels are. So blood pressure is a robust predictor of future incidences of stroke and coronary heart disease and heart attack and heart failure and cardiovascular related deaths. So, but central to um, hypertension or blood vessels elasticity is the pathophysiology of hypertension is the loss of arterial compliance or elasticity, which is the lack of ability for the blood vessels to stretch. So compliance is really just stretchiness. So when we lose vascular compliance, that's losing vascular ability to stretch and to recoil. And that's really important. Actually, how it's not really necessary. Uh-huh. So the endothelium, which was mentioned earlier, are the cells that line the inner layer of the blood vessels, are really neat cells. And I feel like I'm saying this all the time because it's just so cool, but it's one of the neatest things about physiology and hydrotherapy. Those actually, as they're moved or manipulated or heated up, basically anything, if you just look at them, no, not quite, they secrete nitric oxide. And nitric oxide, as we mentioned earlier, is the most potent vasodilator in the body. So this is everybody with hypertension or anybody who knows somebody with hypertension or anybody who knows somebody that has high blood pressure. This is it right here. This, if we can stimulate nitric oxide to be produced, will lower the blood pressure. And to answer your question about can these things last? Yes, this has a latent effect, which means it lasts longer than the actual therapy being applied. So the levels of nitric oxide will still be there, and you'll have a lasting effect of that nitric oxide. And nitroglycerin is a is a is based off of nitric oxide. It's just a synthetic form of it that we can put if somebody's having a heart attack. You know, I was an EMT for a while, and so we did a lot of that. Give them nitric oxide for their chest pain to dilate the blood vessels so they don't have that heart attack. Reverse the blockage, hopefully, and get them to the hospital where they can receive further treatment. So, but we actually can produce that most powerful vasodilator on our own. And there's a variety of things that do that. Just a hot bath, because what are we doing when we are in a hot bath or a hot shower? Put our hands in. We're dilating. We're moving. We're manipulating the endothelial cells. So we're producing nitric oxide. Even a massage can produce nitric oxide because you're manipulating the blood vessels. Even exercise, moving. This is what I mean by like just looking at them. Not quite, but just a lot of things produce this. But hydrotherapy, to the largest extent, produces that nitric oxide, and so that's pretty incredible. Even sunlight, as we learned from Sister Penny's presentation, uh, um, secretes nitric oxide. So yeah, say it again. Okay. Okay. Yep. End stage heart failure. In this study, patients with cardiomyopathy with refractory chronic congestive heart failure who were awaiting heart transplantation, so they had significant issues, were given a warm steam foot bath. The grade of mitral regurgitation tended to decrease, and endothelial function, measured by arterial tomometry, significantly increased. Thus, steam foot bath therapy is safe and beneficial for patients with end-stage heart failure awaiting heart transplantation. So this can be used in very uh, extreme cases even. So that's pretty good to know. So the endothelial function, what we were just talking about, is the nitric oxide production. That's where that's what produces that, the endothelial cells. So water, this is getting more into more of the physics of it, but it's important because then you can understand bigger things. Um, Water has a high specific heat capacity, which just means it can store a lot of heat, thermal energy. So specific heat capacity, the amount of, and that's how we measure a calorie. So a calorie is, this might be taking some of you back to high school a little bit, but a calorie is actually the amount of energy that takes 1 gram of water to heat that up, 1 gram of water, 1 degree Celsius. So if you have 1 gram of water and you want to move that 1 gram of water that is 40 degrees to 41 degrees, how many calories would it take? It would take 1 calorie. Okay, that's how we get a calorie. That's the definition of that calorie. But but before I even go on, and then thermal conduction is the transfer of that thermal energy. So when I touch this, um, depending on which one's hotter, the heat is either flowing this way or like taking heat away from me, or I'm getting the energy from it. Oftentimes, like an ice cube, the ice cube is not losing. I mean, it's losing energy because it's being absorbed into the air. But heat is diffusing it, and ice is absorbing it. That's what it is. Sorry. So an ice cube is not giving off its heat; it's absorbing heat. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, see it. Yeah, it's just how it actually happens. So um, specific heat capacity. So this is why when you go into a hot water bath, you're in that like in the case of a bath, like neck deep in water. That's a lot of conduction, direct contact with that water. That's a huge ability to be able to augment or change our body temperature. So convection is through the air, right? And that may be more in a sauna. And if you increase the humidity of that sauna, you get more of the conduction effect of it because there's more water in that air. So, but in this case, conduction, when we're in that bathtub, that's a lot of thermal energy being added. So we're really augmenting our metabolism, increasing metabolism, and a variety of other things that we're going to notice. So a shower to a less extent, but still very good. The bath would be the best. But just because you can't do the best doesn't mean you can't do a shower or a hot foot bath or just putting your hands in hot water even. So something that's really neat that also lends to the power of hydrotherapy that's less known is heat shock proteins. How many people have heard of heat shock proteins before? And if you had, it's probably me. you know, okay, yeah. So heat shock proteins are pretty incredible. They're actually recently kind of discovered. What these proteins do is they go around and they work in cellular maintenance of different of the DNA of different proteins. So for a protein to be able to function, it needs to have the right genetic sequence, right? The DNA needs to be in the right structure and the double helix structure, but also it needs to have that right sequence. And if it's not in that right sequence, what heat shock proteins do is they say, oh, this isn't right. This is not what it's supposed to be. Let's reorient those amino acids or whatever's wrong with it, and it'll fix it. But if it's too far gone, it'll actually attach to it and call other white blood cells to get rid of that protein and or cause that protein to commit apoptosis, which is just cell death, or a form of protein recycling. It'll just break down that protein so it can use the amino acids to rebuild another protein. So it just rearranges those things. Also, if a protein, so in order for a protein to function, it needs to have the right genetic sequence, but also it needs to be folded in the right way. If you see, I mean, you can kind of see it with their like proteins. They have weird shapes, really neat shapes. It looks kind of chaotic at times, but it's actually very important. If it doesn't have the correct shape, um, then it's not going to function, or it's going to function inappropriately. So what the heat shock proteins will do is, oh, that's not. It's like they know what it's supposed to look like. God put it in them to know the right shape that they're supposed to be, and it'll actually refold it like origami or something, like remake that protein. Unless it's too far gone, then it'll just cause that protein to be recycled. This is just because I'm saying protein and recycling. This is the main reason why you don't need that much protein in your diet, because proteins, like I'm not going to say the number, but it's very high, like 60, 70%. You know, very of the protein that we have. I just said the number. It's like 60-70% of the protein that we use is recycled protein. So like the amino acids that make up that protein, if we need a certain amount of amino acids, it'll just take from the proteins that are being recycled and then reuse them to make more protein. So you don't actually, if someone's not getting enough protein or less protein, it'll just do more protein recycling. I'm not saying that you should have less than what you ought to have in protein, but it definitely doesn't need to be more than 52 grams of protein um, for most people. Athletes might be definitely are a little different. So heat shock proteins, especially on tumors. If there's a tumor, benign or cancerous, heat shock proteins will actually find those and say, "Oh, that's not normal," and they bind to the tumor themselves, and they signal to lymphocytes to come and eat and consume and break down that tumor. That's pretty incredible. This is all the work of heat shock proteins. One protein. Hey, Jai, stay with us. Okay, so so where they signal to the T cell lymphocytes to be cytotoxic towards that tumor. That's what heat shock proteins do. So you might be thinking, how can we get the benefits of these heat shock proteins, right? Like if they're so incredible, how can we get those? Well, as it says right there, humans are induced to make heat shock proteins when the temperature is raised to several degrees above their normal body temperature. So in Celsius, that normal body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. In Fahrenheit, it's 98.6. Um, but when we go just a few degrees above that, like 40, 41 degrees, 42 especially, heat shock proteins are being activated. Mm-hmm. So dysfunctional and disordered proteins, which these heat shock proteins are going around to fix, are associated with many disorders. So, common features of cardiovascular disease. This is a result of proteins being dysfunctional or disordered or not in the right folded shape. Aggregation, the clumping together of different proteins, also is associated with many diseases. And this aggregation can lead to mutations and cancer. And also proteins not carrying out their purpose if they're not in the right shape or anything of that nature. This aggregation and clumping are strongly implicated in the pathogenesis, the how disease starts, of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and Huntington's disease. So this is really neat. Like if we can activate these heat shock proteins, even if we don't have a cardiovascular issue, we could benefit a lot of different things, even these neurodegenerative diseases. Speaking of brain health, warm water immersion bath was beneficial in maintaining brain function and homeostasis, keeping everything at where the body likes it to be, by increasing the concentration of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a neuron-inducing factor, and reducing the concentration of cortisol. So lots of powerful things there. Also, cold water applications, and cold application and health. Um, Cold is now it's small. Cold is known to activate the sympathetic nervous system and to increase the blood levels of beta endorphins. Right, we've heard of endorphins today, even um, noradrenaline. Cold shower sends an overwhelming amount of electrical impulses from the peripheral nerve endings to the brain, which results in an antidepressive effect. Weimar University and a lot of other lifestyle centers around the world, even, but Weimar specifically, because they have a depression recovery program, they use a lot of hot and cold showers, but even just cold showers because it's so good for as an antidepressant and just getting the brain functioning again at optimal levels. Daily brief cold stress can increase both number and activity of peripheral cytotoxic T lymphocytes and natural killers. These are the major effectors of our um, innate immune system. And so that's pretty important. Just brief cold exposure. Remember, you're not getting cold, you're just brief cold exposure can increase your white blood cell count and activity. All right. And cold stress induces analgesia, and analgesic like pain reduction aspects, and they might be mediated by increased production of opioid peptides, beta endorphins. So they actually help with pain reduction. Even you've heard like, oh, he sprained his ankle, put an ice pack on it. It also helps with the pain It's also to reduce inflammation, slow down that process. But it also has an analgesic effect. And actually, consequently, water, like it'd be at a mist at that point almost, but water 135 degrees, which is very hot, actually acts as a vasoconstrictor also. And a doctor by the name of Kellogg would actually use this in surgeries, even invasive surgeries, to control blood flow. Um, so we don't do that much anymore because we have other medications to do that. But I wonder if we were to explore, go down this road more, if this was a higher, uh, if there was more money in the research for that and um, surgeries and blood control. I wonder if that would be understand more of that now. But Kellogg was doing that, and then other forms of blood control took place, and we use those. Yes. Yeah. So so what about green clay if you sprain your ankle? So that's supposed to reduce the inflammation as well. Um, that can be a good therapy. From what I understand of clay is it actually helps to remove toxins and to remove extracellular fluid. So if somebody has edema or just trying to reduce, um, but I'm not saying that it wouldn't be beneficial to that. Yeah. Case studies are important. They're powerful. There is enough of them become something. So absolutely. Yeah, reducing the inflammation. Well, the reason why it's swollen is because of the gap junctions within the blood vessels. The fluid in the blood leaks out and kind of stabilizes that joint. And so you'd be reducing the inflammation by way of pulling out that extracellular fluid. So yeah, definitely um, have an effect. So cold water immersion reduces the nerve conductive velocity, you know, the saltatory conduction that happens when you're trying to tell your muscles to move or something, but it also reduces the pain, the nociception. So that's how that works. Another family of proteins are the FOXO3 proteins. These play an important role in human lifespan and healthy aging. They regulate a vast number of genes that combat elements of cellular aging, such as damage to the DNA, like heat shock proteins do, and damage to proteins and lipids and the loss of stem cell function. So they help to maintain all of that stuff. They increase the production of genes that regulate DNA repair. They suppress tumors and stem cell functions. They improve that immune function and protein aggregation to further mediate the deleterious effects of aging. So they do a whole host of things. They're in the category of cellular maintenance. But these are even increased. We can augment these as well. I'm just going to continue with heat. And does it? Yeah, it's similar to heat shock proteins. Just a few degrees above uh, body temperature, you increase those FOXO3 proteins production, and thereby their ability to do all those cellular maintenance things. Um, and by the way, all of us have cellular problems. It's happening all day long and it's being repaired all day long. But at some point, it's the damage is happening more than the repair is happening, like with osteoarthritis. You're breaking down that cartilage faster than it can be repaired. Well, this cellular damage in our brain and is always happening just because of use, but is it being repaired faster than it's being broken down is the question. God designed us with the ability to regenerate. I believe God designed us to live forever, but sin has uh, uh, put a stop to that. And praise the Lord, because we wouldn't want sin to go on forever either. So, um, following heat stress, this is where it is. FOXO3 proteins form a complex with sirtuin 1 and 2 a little bit, um, and enzyme that influences aging and longevity via multiple molecular pathways. Sirtuins regulate a variety of metabolic processes, including the release of insulin, mobilization of lipids, response to stress, and modulation of lifespan. Sirtuin 1 enhances FOXO3's resistance to oxidative stress. Oxidation is basically, well, like rust in your body. It's the bad thing of the body. It's what damages proteins. Um, so, warm water bath for type 2 diabetes. So they put so one last study, warm water bathing for type 2 diabetes. Study subjects were asked to sit in a hot tub and the temperatures varied. But for 30 minutes a day, 6 day for 6 weeks, for almost sorry, for 30 minutes a day, 6 days a week, for almost 3 weeks. So in only 3 weeks, this study was done. No other lifestyle habits or dietary changes was made. All of the measured biomarkers improved. One patient had to lower his insulin by 18% to prevent hypoglycemia. The average weight loss was 2 pounds. Average fasting blood glucose level dropped 23 points, and their glycosylated hemoglobin also decreased. So this is just a bath, and the bath is not the preferred way to treat diabetes. But only with the bath for 3 weeks, it improved the diabetes for reasons that we learned about earlier. So a lot of things are happening when we're doing this hydrotherapy. Hot foot bath reduces fever, since it causes the circulating white blood cells to increase. The hot foot bath can combat a cold, headache, or any congestion of the head, the chest, or the pelvic organs in menstrual difficulties. Can open up the total blockage nasal passages, and a person in a person in about 5 minutes. And it also lowers blood pressure. Let's look at some of those things. It's kind of interesting. There's a couple different kinds of headaches, but in regards to hydrotherapy, there's a pressure headache, and that's where we have congestion of blood in the brain. And so that just pressure is just that's a headache right there. Bam. And another kind of headache is the tension headache, which is oftentimes the upper trapezius muscles and the scalenes and cervicis muscles that pull tension on this aponeurosis. It's a tissue that goes over the skull, and it just compresses the skull, and that's a headache too. You can usually feel the difference. But with the pressure headache, let's just think of this logically, cause and effect. If there's increased pressure in the brain due to fluid, if we pull that fluid, if we dilate the blood vessels in our feet, we have a fixed amount of fluid in our body. So where does the fluid in our head have to go if we dilate the blood vessels? Has to go to our feet. Yeah. So you're actually reducing the pressure in your head. And don't worry, you'll almost never reduce it so much that you pass out. Although actually in a really hot bath, um, you for other reasons, but you won't. It's very hard to get to that. So, but also if it is a tension headache, what would you do for that tension headache? Like, tension being caused by the muscles. What would you do if it's a tension headache and you wanted to release that? Massage. You want to loosen up those muscles, but what also remember thixotropy, the muscles. Heat, yeah, apply heat to the muscles and they relax. Remember, because heat increases metabolism to everything except for the muscles. That's a reactive effect of them. Because when it's hot out, you don't feel like doing a lot because your muscles don't want to generate a lot of body heat. Because you don't want to add to that hot environment. But in this case, you apply the heat on the shoulders and it relaxes those muscles. So if you can't afford a $90 massage, you can do that. I can't afford a $90 massage either. Um, so blocked nasal passages, all this congestion of mucus. Well, you can increase the fluidity of the mucus, and even putting your face in hot water and actually going back and forth when cold and hot can really help to move the fluid, the mucus in your sinuses, sigmoid sinuses, and I forget the names of the other sinuses, but yeah, just get that flowing. So Jai, I'm sure as many, actually he'll maybe talk about it tomorrow maybe, but many individuals, and I do too, where they just have never had really like clear sinuses, but then they do hot and cold on their sinuses and they can breathe again. It's really life changing if you've gone a long time that way with that low grade infection in your sinuses. Not enough to cause any other issues, but enough to cause congestion in your sinuses. So, so a hot foot bath you can use that for a variety of reasons, either just increasing circulation to your feet, or let's say you sprained your ankle. A sprain is where you stretch the tendon more than it ought to be, and it breaks instead of stretches. And to improve that circulation after about 24 hours after the initial ice application, because you want to control the inflammation. Because how your body responds to injury like that is it just overdoes the inflammation. But we can calm that down by applying ice. After that, you can do hot and cold, and you're bringing new blood to the area. You're healing the tendon more quickly. So hot and cold. Yeah, so you do hot and cold after or before is the question. And actually, I say this because this is what has been said for a long time. You apply cold for the first 12 to 24 hours. But actually, in sports medicine, they're finding that they get better results when they just immediately go to hot and cold. But for me, because of the physiology of understanding what's happening, it makes I still would tend to do the cold first because you don't want to increase that swelling. I would still want to reduce that swelling initially and then go into the hot and cold. But I'll just have to say, for information standpoint, because that's out there too in sports medicine, where their chief priority is to get their client or their athlete back on the field quickly. Like they don't benefit from having somebody sick. They need to get them back out there, and that way they're making money. So that's good information. But I would still tend to just do the ice first in that kind of traumatic injury. hmm So again, pelvic congestive issues with menstruation and stuff. Some ladies might benefit from putting their feet in hot water to decongest that area. I'm not too familiar with that for obvious reasons. So a contrast shower. But I should say this before we go on: hot foot bath. Well, what does the contrast look like? Well, we typically say for the depth that you want to heat up your foot, 3 minutes hot, 3 to 4 minutes hot, and then 30 seconds to a minute cold, and going back and forth. And as long as you don't have any kind of neuropathy, um, it can be about as hot as you can take it, even. Uh, but people with neuropathy um, can't sense the hot temperatures very well, and also they can't. And if they have peripheral artery disease, they can't take that heat and distribute it throughout their body as well, so that those cells can get too hot if their blood vessels cannot dilate or be able to take the heat away quick enough. So peripheral artery disease and neuropathy are two conditions that just to be aware of. They're not absolute contraindicative because they can benefit. Peripheral artery disease, the arteries have lost their vascular compliance. Well, we can help to get that back, but we want to just do it gradually and incrementally. Neuropathy, well, the nerves have lost their ability to sense things well because of lack of circulation. So we can do circulatory treatments to help that, but we just have to be aware. And so this is helping you so you can actually help them, because most books will say it's a contraindication and don't do it, but that's just like covering their backs in a way. Like, but if you understand the principles, then you can work with it. Yeah, very good question. When you're doing the hot and cold on the feet, you don't have to put the towel on the head. The reason why we put a cold towel on the head is because most of our cells can handle very wide range of temperature, but our neuronocytes, the brain cells, can't do that very well. And actually, what they found is around 106, 7, and higher degrees Fahrenheit, they begin to just degenerate and break down. They're very sensitive. Um, and so, in the case of a fever, somebody has a fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit, that and maybe it's climbing. You want to get that down, or at least keep the head cool and allow the fever to run its course, but keep the head cool. That's why often physicians, if somebody's having a fever, or especially a child, they'll just give them antipyretics, which is a medication to drop the temperature, to reduce the fever, just because they don't want to take any chances of the kid or individual patient have any neurodegenerative consequences from that. But if you understand what's happening, then you can keep the head cool. You can be aware of that, and still allow the body to go through its fever state, which is very beneficial for a variety of reasons: circulation, heat shock proteins, metabolism, white blood cells, FOXO3 proteins, all sorts of beneficial things that no medication can actually do. No medication can increase circulation directly, because it's always just vasodilation, but it can't do the constriction part. Or one medication can do the constriction. You know, no medication can do both. No medication can increase heat shock proteins. No medication can increase FOXO3 proteins. And so this is really like, wow, that's pretty incredible. So, yeah, and I don't know if I get to the fever. Yeah, yeah, I do. Okay, so I'll save it. So contrast showers increases circulation. You're in that cold. Not only are you getting the antidepressive effects of hot and cold, or the cold water wakes you up in the morning, especially in the morning, but you're dilating the blood vessels, and then you're constricting the blood vessels, circulating the blood. No, perfect health requires perfect circulation. It also requires good blood, and we can take care of that through nutrition. And removal of toxins stimulates the immune system, speeds up the healing process. So again, in the shower, 3 to 4 minutes hot, 30 seconds to 1 minute cold. And this is as hot as you can go and as cold as you can go, respectively. Yeah, that good point. Always end with the cold, um, and that's especially when you're horizontal. If you're laying down or something, you dilate. If you were to end with hot and you just did a total body bath, all that blood is in your extremities and in your capillaries, in your dermis, right? And then you go to stand up, and you might faint or something. And so lack of blood flow in the brain is because you just stood up, orthostatic hypotension, and you walk around and then you could collapse, and then you're at risk of breaking a hip, falling, or something else. So you want to end on, and there's other reasons to end on cold too, but that's the big one. So just end on cold is a good idea. Not all the time. Sometimes, especially when you're dealing with the muscles, it's nice to end on hot to maintain the relaxation of those muscles. And then fomentations, we kind of spoke of them earlier, but fomentations were used, they're used a lot, especially on the chest, for pulmonary diseases or infectious diseases of the lungs. And a fomentation is, I kind of described it earlier, but I like to make them out of just wet towels that are damp, and I will show that practically tomorrow. But just take a towel, get it wet, wring it out, and I'll even put it in the microwave, or I'll dip it in hot water, and that's my. But I find putting it in the microwave works really well for 4 to 5 minutes, and they're very hot. Then fold them in another towel, and then you apply that to the chest, and then that heats up the chest, heats up the lungs, brings the white blood cells to the lungs, helps that pulmonary infection. Um, yeah, lots of good things happen there. And when I do a fomentation like that, I usually have one on the back and the front to really heat up the lungs. And then I'll alternate with hot and cold. I'll do cold mitten friction on the chest. So every 3 to 4 minutes. And I'll kind of run through this tomorrow too. Yeah. So it wouldn't not necessarily. I mean, you got to be more careful because kids pediatrics is like they're like a whole, totally different animal. It's like not even human as far as health science is concerned. Really, it is. So you want to be really careful with pediatric or kids and hydrotherapy. You definitely can, but oftentimes, especially like with a fever, I wouldn't necessarily put them in a hot bath because their temperature changes so quickly, modulates so fast, and but adults they're a little bit slower, so you can see what's happening, but it just changes so fast with kids. So I wouldn't. But what I would do if if the child had a fever, I would just keep the head cool and allow it to happen. But with children, you just have to be aware their temperature changes so fast. But we can modulate and um, adapt more gradually. Yeah, I'm not very familiar with them, but I think it's easy enough to get the benefits of nitric oxide just by moving, walking, eating good food, but sunlight exposure, bathing. So I think it might be a waste of money, but maybe for some individuals that can't do some of those activities, I think there is a place for them. But by and large, my general view of supplements is if you can get them from whole foods or if you can get them through activity, in the case of nitric oxide, or I just as soon do it that way. But I have to say I haven't done explicit research on them necessarily. Um, but yeah, they'd probably be fine. I don't know. So hyperthermia bath. With this, after this, we'll end because hyperthermia bath really helps to encompass a lot of the hydrotherapy principles. But is a fever a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah, it's a good thing. Yes, fever is your friend. Because fever is doing a lot of good things. The fever is in response to some sort of infection going on, whether bacterial or viral infection. And so your body's like, it senses this and says, okay, we've got to get a fever going. Because why? Well, viruses, especially viruses, they're actually thermally weak, despite what some people might want you to believe. They're actually the weakest cells we have. Bacteria are also thermally weak, but they're a little stronger than viruses, so they can withstand. However, they're still thermally weak compared to our robust, healthy cells. So just increasing the temperature, your body knows this, increases the temperature, it creates a thermotoxic environment for those bacteria or those viruses. And but not only that, you're remember what happens to metabolism with heat? It increases, yeah. So the metabolism of white blood cells, what happens to those? They increase. White blood cells are responsible for attacking and monitoring infection and white blood and viruses and bacteria. So yeah, you can think of the immune system like this. There's the innate immune system, which is the ones that are kind of circulating around the blood. You have certain quantities circulating around your circulatory system, and they're monitoring for infection and things that shouldn't be there. And then if it does find something, it's the innate response of the immune system to attack that, and it'll signal to other immune system, other immunocytes, killer T cells, natural killers, lymphocytes, to come to that and fight it and attack it. Okay, that's your innate immune system. But your adaptive immune system is where you're producing antigens to combat known antibodies. So after you first encounter something, your immune system is just attacking it with everything it has, but after it understands what it is, it says, okay, we've got a specific thing. We know how to attack this in the future. And so it creates an antibody, a specially designed type of immunocyte to be able to attack that antigen, which would be the foreign object or the thing that the invader. Okay. But when we have that infection, our heat, the body increases its heat, increases the metabolism of those things, creates a thermotoxic environment, increase the metabolism of the white blood cells. And also we got the heat shock proteins, which are doing their function, and FOXO3 proteins. So from multiple pathways, we're combating that antigen or whatever's happening, that virus or bacteria. So very powerful. But if somebody doesn't have enough energy, or for some reason their body is too tired or not able to produce a fever, we can even create an artificial fever, and that's where we either do a hot foot bath and wrap them up with blankets to elevate their temperature, or even better, put them in a hot bath, warm, and then gradually getting warmer, monitoring their temperature orally or axillary or temporally, um, to make sure we're not going too much. And if we can be around 102, 104, that's optimal. That's a good fever state. That's where after 104, they actually really see not much increase in white blood cell activity. So no reason to go above 104. I just say 102 is fine, but no reason to go above 104, and you get closer to the not that close, but you do get closer to where you could have some brain issues. So uh, we're stimulating all sorts of things by an artificial fever. The heat shock proteins, FOXO3 protein stimulation, vascular gymnastics. This is the term that I really like. Um, uh, it's just like we need to stretch our skeletal muscles. Well, hydrotherapy is stretching our smooth muscles, our vasculature, which is also important, which will add to vascular compliance, the elasticity of it all. Just like you do the range of motion that you want to keep, well, if you want to keep your vascular motion, you have to do it. So just like anything else. So I really would encourage you, even if you have limited space or you don't have a bathtub that you can lay in it, like in her condition situation, but you have a shower, go hot and cold on that shower every morning. um, or or uh, or if you hurt your ankle or something, do a hot and cold on that ankle. um, or you have circulatory issues. Actually, I have a friend who Jason Blakeney. Some of you might know, but he heard it. He tore his Achilles tendon, and he did hot and cold on that for quite some time, just before the winter months. And he normally has cold feet, like just always cold feet. Anyone here ever have cold feet, or just all the time cold feet? Yeah. So he did for his Achilles tendon. He wanted to regain, help speed up the recovery that he tore. Hot and cold religiously, like every day he was doing hot and cold. And then that winter, he was just noticing that, wow, this foot is never cold, but this one is. So it's like real life uh, affirmation of the reality of the physics, um, that this circulation improved. So that's just we know that to be true, but his experience proved it to be true also. That because of his hot and cold to the foot, because he was doing it for the recovery of his Achilles tendon, his circulation was better. Therefore, his foot was warmer, and And I might say, like, well, if you have poor circulation, it might be a good idea to do a routine hot and cold treatment on your feet or your hands or wherever that is. So lots of cool things about hydrotherapy, very powerful. I'd encourage you to become more knowledgeable and also apply it in your own life. And yeah, take that cold shower in the morning, hot and cold shower, or when you are feeling sick, take those hot and cold showers, increase those white blood cells, or even when you are sick or before you get sick, sit in that hot tub. Usually, a hyperthermia bath as a legit treatment involves another person to be there to be able to monitor things like your temperature, your mental state, your other things, a little bit more training. But on your own, you can at least take a hot bath and you're increasing all of those things to an extent. It's on a spectrum, it's on a scale, a sliding scale. The warmer it is, the more those benefits are occurring to a point. Like I said, there's no real benefit to go above 104 because white blood cell activity and quantity doesn't really increase. When I say we understand the activity, but the quantity, we don't all the time have high levels of white blood cells circulating in our circulatory system. It's only when there's a problem that they come out. They're actually housed in the army barracks called the lymph nodes. That's where they're kept. And when there's a problem, they come out into, they respond to that emergency. So, um, any quick questions? We will also have a more practical class tomorrow concerning hydrotherapy, but also we're going to talk a little bit on hydrotherapy, but also natural home remedies that can be done. And Jai is going to be leading out in that class, and he's got awesome information regarding that. And then we'll also have a cooking class tomorrow. So definitely come out for that. And a lunch will be provided as well, where we'll be able to sample some of the recipes. So definitely. Any questions, real quick, concerning hydrotherapy or anything else that I might be able to give some feedback on before we close, and don't feel like you're holding everybody up. But, yeah. hmm Yeah, I would actually agree with that. I actually know somebody. Actually, no, I know somebody who knows somebody. You know how that goes. But it was a sad story. You shouldn't laugh. Anyway, that they just ate, him and his friends, and then they went out for a swim, and he died because all the blood flow is in the stomach, and in the cold water. Not sure precisely how it worked, but just it was too much, and he died. He wasn't able to. He kind of passed out in the water and died because all the blood flows here, and then now he's requiring it in his muscles, but it's not there, and he passed out and died. So that's the reason that you wouldn't want to do it. You want to allow the digestion to occur, and that's not just him. That's a known thing. Well, he knows it. A lot of people kind of have been told that, and for good reason. So right after you eat, it's good just to allow your digestive system to digest the food, because there's a lot of blood flow there, and it's not good to do a lot of learning activity right after lunch like we're doing, because where's the blood? It's in your stomach, not necessarily in your brain. So, but c'est la vie. That's life. hmm hmm Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. 100%. So, any other quick questions that we could maybe? And feel free think of some questions, and then you can come back. Yes. Praise the Lord. Right. Some of it is Monica. When is the cooking class over? I'm not going to tell you because there might be some among us that might just come for the refreshment. No, it's probably going to be 45 minutes after it starts. Yep, yeah, we will be there too. We're involved with that as well, so it'll definitely be done before that. So, yeah, I don't know if that question is one that needs to be recorded. So neat. All right, maybe we can go ahead and pray and close out and pray that some of this information sticks. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to meet together. We know this wasn't always um, uh, politically possible, but we're thankful for the freedom that we have now to be able to openly talk about you, learn about your creation, and how you've designed us. And I pray that uh, you will remind us of the information that we've learned when we need it, recall it to our memories. Thank you so much for how you take care of us. Help us to lean on you more, learn of you more, and share you with others. In Jesus' name, amen.